We welcome Jennifer Williams back for segment two of three here as we're talking about employee ownership trusts and employee ownership plans. And far be it for us to not talk about how we can be tax smart. And this transition, in particular, the employee ownership trusts has some particular benefits. So I'm hoping we can dive into a little bit of that. Again, high level, because just to preface that neither of us are accountants. However, let's share some of the highlights, and of course, we want to bring in the accountants to dig into the details.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So
what are some of the top financial benefits of the employee ownership trust for the business owner who's exiting?
yeah. So maybe I'll just back up a tiny bit. So
Yeah, sure.
employee ownership trusts are new, they're new legislation in Canada. They were passed in June
Good
of
point.
2024. And they were brought into Canadian legislation because um, there are a lot of business owners that are looking to transition their business. And the reality is we don't have enough people to buy those businesses without having them being acquired by private equity or foreign buyers. And so the federal government was incentivized to find a way to keep Canadian businesses locally owned. And so they looked to the US and the UK, who've been running employee ownership trusts and employee ownership plans for many years. And one of the things that was very effective in the UK and the uptake of employee ownership trusts were tax incentives, actually in the US as well. And so what the federal government has done is they've said, if you sell a majority of your business to your employees through an employee ownership trust, you can access up to a $10 million lifetime capital gains exemption. So the usual lifetime capital gains exemption is 1.25 million. I'm going to assume most of your listeners know about the lifetime capital gains, but let me just do a quick.
Yeah, I think it warrants just
Okay.
taking a minute for sure.
Okay. So basically in Canada, there are two ways that you can make money that you don't pay tax on. So one is when you own your home and you live in your home and that house appreciates in value. If you bought your house for $200,000 and you sell it for $1 million, you're not paying tax on that $800,000 because you lived in that house. That was your home. The same goes for shares that you hold in a Canadian controlled private corporation that's a qualified small business. So if you own shares in a company that you've grown and you started that company with the money in your bank account, and that company grows and now it's worth $10 million, and you sell that company, the appreciation in that value you're not being taxed on if you sell to an employee ownership trust.
And we
So
need to preface that share. This is the share.
that is
Um,
for the employee ownership trust
yeah,
specifically.
yeah.
If you were to sell to a third party, and let's say your business is worth 10 million, then you can access up to 1.25 million in lifetime capital gains exemption, but not the 10 million.
Hmm.
But this is that tax incentive. The federal government has said if you sell majority control to an employee ownership trust, you can access up to $10 million in lifetime capital gains exemption. Now, it's new legislation and there is a timeline on this. So the employee ownership trust, because it's new, has to be implemented before the end of 2026. Now, the hope is that that will get extended and that those tax benefits will reach out into the future. But if you're a business owner and you're between 65 and 75 years old right now or older, and you are thinking maybe this offers a good option for me to sell my business, I highly recommend you start looking at this now because we know it takes on average 18 months to
Right.
get this implemented.
Mhm.
And that December 2026 deadline is looming. And so
Mhm.
you would hate to not do it and get around to it in a couple of years' time and not have that $10 million lifetime capital gains exemption exist for you.
Mhm. Now there's a lot of hope that though that legislation will continue on with possibly some adjustments or amendments to the specifics of the legislation. However, these are the facts as we know them today.
Yeah. And I don't think the legislation will change. I just don't know if the $10 million lifetime capital
Right.
gains exemption will still be there. It might go to a $5 million exemption. It might, that's
Yeah.
the piece that I don't know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, but what we do know is 10 million before the end of 2026. That exists.
And that's significant. And it warrants having a conversation about what the future looks like
Yeah.
for the business. And we just finished sharing in our last show about legacy and company culture and values. Um, we can't leave off the table the dollars and cents,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's, you know, the potential of what you can do with that money in terms of your impact for your family and your community as well, right? Like, that can leave a legacy and an impact. So,
Um, and this might be throwing you off a little bit, Jennifer, because this is, we did talk about a few questions that I want to bring up, but um, how familiar are the other experts that we would want to draw on, like accountants and lawyers and so forth? How familiar are our accountants and lawyers with the employee ownership trusts?
that's a great question.
Do you
I,
know?
yeah. So what I typically hear from people is oftentimes their accountants and lawyers don't know about it, or they've heard very peripheral things about it. Um, my own accountant included. And and there is a level of when people don't know about something, it's easy to dismiss it as an option. Let's just
Mhm,
put it that way, right?
mhm,
I don't think anyone is being ill-intended, but it's the kind of thing where, like, as a lawyer or an accountant, I'm not going to be encouraging my client to explore something that I don't understand myself.
mhm.
So one of the things that I've been on a mission to do is really have as many conversations, be on as many podcasts, get the information as widely as possible so that people have the information, and lawyers and accountants we can demystify what this all means so that more people know that it exists as an option.
Yeah, I think that is so important. And so, a big reason to have you on the show and to be talking about the employee ownership trusts, because I personally, last year in 2024, I saw the little blurb that came out, and I thought, okay, but I don't know anything about this. And all of my years, I've never heard anybody talk about it other than being aware of a few companies who were structured as employee-owned companies, mostly to the point when we described them before being sort of the architectural or engineering style
Right.
firms.
Yeah.
But it kind of just was like a one-liner. And then I think it was when we connected
Mhm.
and ended up having a short conversation. And I think my eyes started to just get wider and wider as we were talking about it. So that would have been the fall of 2024.
Yeah.
We are in sort of the first quarter of 2025. As listeners know, I'm not always recording and then putting the material out right away, but I suspect you'll be hearing this. This will be going live somewhere in the first half of 2025. And so there's still time to explore this further.
Yeah.
Share it. Listen, Self-Made Nation. If this is of interest to you, please do reach out to Jennifer and her team at Firefly Insights. I got that right. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. And speak to your accountant and your lawyer. Have them listen to this conversation. Have them reach out to Jennifer or myself so that a conversation can get started. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Um,
I'm always happy to talk if anyone wants to have a conversation and bring their lawyers and accountants in. I'm happy to have those conversations. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so those are benefits, but it's not all rainbows and unicorns and butterflies and rose-colored glasses. What are some of the risks involved in this structure that we should be aware of?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I think that the number one risk is making sure it's done well. Like, in theory, you could go to your lawyer and they could draft up the trust agreement and you could implement a trust tomorrow. Um, I would caution against doing that just because there are a lot of, as we talked about in the last segment, cultural and emotional and leadership and change management pieces that go alongside this. And so, what I have commonly heard from clients is that, they tried employee ownership and it didn't work. But usually when I dig into that, it's because they didn't actually design an employee ownership structure that met their needs. And so, um, I think the risk is not taking the time to do it right, to be honest.
Hmm. Hmm. So again, start with a conversation, go through the due diligence, the what I would call like a discovery
Mhm.
session,
Yep.
discovery process,
Yep.
and and weigh the pros and cons of the structure itself
Yep.
before just jumping into it. Yeah. What about financial benefits for the employees themselves? How can they really like what does that look like from for them in building, I guess, their personal balance sheets and growing their wealth?
Yeah. So this is one of the things I think is most powerful about employee ownership models is that you go from distributing profits from to one or a few to many. And so in the case of an employee ownership trust, the profits are distributed to all employees. Now you can determine how that gets allocated based on role and tenure and within the company. But what we know is that employees in employee-owned companies have the ability to accumulate wealth and to earn more money than people in non-employee-owned companies. We also know statistically that employee-owned companies are more profitable than non-employee-owned companies. And so not only, I often have business owners describe this as like, I would rather have a smaller piece of a bigger pie, right? If my
Hmm.
company is, if I can grow my company and I own less of it, but I share it with more people, that's great because I still have ultimately net at the end of the day, net the same. And so, because employee ownership has been known to lots of research around this, around growing profitability, growing efficiency, having people stay in the company longer, all of those things help to drive your profitability, which helps everyone in the company to do better, including the employees.
Right. So the employees have a stake in which we referred to before about sort of chain of command in terms of sharing ideas. It's not like you can suddenly just show up at the CEO's door necessarily, and that's unless that's how it worked in the past to
Right.
deliver feedback. But because you have a direct investment through through the trust, then you know that your day-to-day decisions will have an impact on your
Right.
overall wealth, not just your salary. Yeah, so the return on the investment for the individual employee, along with the minority shareholder, like, and
Yeah.
it could, which is actually a point of clarification. When we say majority, it's basically 51% needs to be in
Correct.
the employee ownership trust. So
Correct.
there's still, 49% that could be the owner or the owner's family
Yep.
or a collection
Or the
of
management
C-suite
team.
management. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, distribution of wealth, creating opportunities for more people to have a secure future. Yeah.
If you look at over the last since the 1980s in Canada, we've had a greater disparity in wealth in the country, right? There are more people who have more money and and there's less in the middle, right? And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
one of the things that I think is really powerful about employee ownership is it can help with that redistribution of wealth so that we have more people in the middle, right? Like you don't want to have haves and have nots. You want to have a society where everyone can benefit and can access, yeah, the fun things that you can do with money.
Yeah. And so, and we want to do that in a smart tax way. And so here's an opportunity that has been presented to a whole segment of business owners, and it's got to just all start with knowing that it's available and having a conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Mhm.
All right. Well, I think that that's the big shiny object of this particular segment. Do you have any fun, frank advice to add for this particular part of our conversation?
So I would say never let tax determine your decision,
Mm,
and know what tax advantages that you have available to you so that you can inform your decision, but don't let it make your decision for you.
right. It's like the tail wagging the dog or whatever
Yeah.
that expression is, right? Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.